Chapter 19. The towns, the forests, the mountains. No! Bring her back! Dawn tried to stop the woman from vanishing with Philippa, but they were gone in a flash. The smoke she left behind dissipated until Dawn was left alone with the cursed spinning wheel. Not only had their plan to destroy the wheel totally failed, but now her only friend here was in danger too. She'd been cursed with the sleeping sickness and kidnapped by the dark fairy. "Dearie, are you okay?" Aunt Mary called. Her aunts both dashed through the door, looking confused. They saw the spinning wheel in Dawn's arms and the smoldering ruins of the bonfire. They both gasped in alarm. "Oh no, what did you do?" Aunt Fleur said. "What happened to the buyer?" Aunt Mary said, scanning the back area by the shed. "She was supposed to be here already." Dawn felt terrible. She knew they meant the best, but she couldn't let them have the spinning wheel back. They wouldn't understand. "I'm so sorry," Dawn said, meeting their eyes for a moment and willing them to sleep. Promptly, both aunts dozed off once again. Dawn knew they'd be okay. For now. However, if she didn't stop the dark fairy from getting her spinning wheel back, then everyone afflicted by the spinning curse would die. And she had to save Philippa. First, she had to get the wheel to safety. She grabbed it and strapped it to the back of her bike with some bungee cords from the shed. She also spotted something else. The antique sword. She grabbed it, put it in the bike basket, then took off, pedaling furiously. She glanced back one last time. Her aunts were still sound asleep on their feet in the backyard, unaware of the danger that threatened them all now. "It's all my fault," Dawn thought as she rode away, and she promised herself she was going to find a way to save her friend and fix it, even if it was the last thing she did. Dawn kept pedaling as fast as she could, cutting across the fields and away from the dusty roads where she'd been easily spotted. She had sunglasses with her just in case. Finally, she found a deserted clearing just inside the tree line by the forest. Occasionally, she heard the roar of a car driving past, but mostly just the sweet chirping of birds and whisper of leaves being swept by a mild breeze. She pulled over, leaned her bike against a tree, then slumped down to think. How was she going to find Philippa and rescue her? The bewitched woman could have taken her anywhere. They'd vanished in a puff of green smoke. The dark fairy's words, uttered from the woman's mouth, echoed through her head. But Dawn knew she couldn't give the spinning wheel to Maleficent, or the dark fairy could transform her sleeping curse into a death curse. Anyone affected by it could perish. She also didn't have much time left. Her aunts would wake up soon, and they'd come looking for her, especially once they discovered the spinning wheel was gone. What am I going to do? Dawn sniffled, feeling a hard lump form in her throat. She felt completely hopeless and lost. More than anything, she wished she'd never gotten in trouble, never been sent away, never found that spinning wheel, and especially never made that deal with the dark fairy. But like some things in life, the past could not be undone. It could only be endured, and maybe, one day if you were lucky, righted by your future choices. Caw, caw! The ravens were back. They swarmed over Dawn's head and dove at her in anger. They had glowing yellow eyes, unnatural eyes like the dark fairies. One raven almost clipped her cheek. She tried to grab her bike, but the ravens drove her from it. "No, get away from me," she yelled, swatting at them. But it was no use. They kept coming at her. She covered her face and ran for shelter in the thick underbrush. She hid under the branches and leaves. She could hear the ravens screaming and circling overhead. She ducked lower, trying to hide herself from the unkindness of ravens. Then suddenly, something large stirred in the undergrowth. It made a terrifying noise as it trampled its way through the forest, snuffling at the air. What was that? Dawn gasped. It snorted again and raised its hairy head, staring right at her. The creature was only a few short feet away from her face. It was covered in wiry brown hair. 2 giant tusks protruded from its mouth, ready to maul any unsuspecting prey it came across. Something else stood out about it. The creature had glowing yellow eyes. Dawn felt her heart leap into her throat. Fear rushed through her to the point where she tasted metal in her mouth. Her brain struggled to understand. Oh no. Killer pigs, Dawn remembered. Philippa had warned her about them. Now that she saw one, she realized it looked nothing like Wilbur from Charlotte's Web. This creature was a monster. The pig locked onto her, hypnotizing her with its unnatural eyes. Dawn froze, caught in its bewitching gaze. The feral pig roared, baring its sharp teeth as its tusks stabbed the air. That snapped Dawn out of her trance. She scrambled away, backing up as fast as she could, but a branch caught her foot. Dawn tripped, falling flat on her back. She pried herself open, feeling pain tear through her. Then she tried to scramble back to her bike and the spinning wheel, but more yellow eyes popped open around her. Dawn gasped again. There was a whole pack of feral pigs. They snorted, pawed, and huffed at the air. And they seemingly wanted one thing: to grab her by their strong jaws and rip her to shreds. No, leave me alone, Dawn cried. She ran through the forest as fast as she could, even as one of the feral pigs slashed her. She could hear the hogs coming, trampling the underbrush with their cloven hooves. It sounded like a stampede. They moved fast, like something was spurring them onward, something unnatural and fierce, and they were gaining on her. Dawn tried to run faster, but a branch hit her midsection, knocking the wind out of her. She struggled back to her feet, sucking down air and trying to run again. The sun had set. The bewitched monster's glowing yellow eyes cut through the inky darkness. They were locked onto her. At least 5 feral pigs charged at her. She knew she was done for. Dawn shut her eyes and braced herself.